The ISS Omen moved through the Viridian Nebula like a needle through silk, long, dark, and precise. Its hull was coated in light-absorbing composite panels, making it nearly invisible against the purple and green clouds of ionized gas that billowed for 10,000 kilometers in every direction. Inside, the ship hummed with the controlled tension of a crew that had not slept properly in 4 days. Captain Lyra Voss stood at the front of the observation deck, her arms crossed, her gray eyes scanning the dark space ahead as though she could see through it by sheer force of will. She wore her uniform poorly, collar open, sleeves rolled to the elbows, which her crew had learned to recognize as a sign that she was thinking hard and did not want to be interrupted. She was 34 years old but looked older. There were lines around her eyes that had not been there before the Battle of Kefren Station, 3 years ago. That battle had lasted 16 hours and ended with a planet cracked in half. Lyra had given the order that cracked it. She had believed at the time that she had no choice. She still believed that, but believing something and being at peace with it are entirely different things. Captain, Commander Dren Vale stepped up beside her. He was a tall man with a steady voice and the kind of face that never showed panic. Lyra valued him more than she had ever told him. "We're approaching the coordinates." "I know. The Council's orders are clear. We enter Zithri space, locate the quantum breach, assess the threat level and return. No engagement, no first contact, no deviation." Lyra turned to look at him. "You rehearsed that 3 times, yes." He didn't smile. "Because I know how you operate." "How do I operate?" "You find a 4th option that nobody planned for and you take it." She almost smiled. "Almost. The Council sent us because nobody else could get here in time. The Zithri have been quiet for 11 years. Not peaceful quiet. There's a difference. Something has changed out there, Dren. Something big enough to create a quantum breach that our instruments detected from 8 light-years away. That's not a malfunction. That's not a natural phenomenon. That's a weapon being tested, or a weapon that went wrong. Or a weapon aimed at us," he said. "Yes, or that." A soft chime came from the navigation console. Dr. Marin Cole looked up from her station, her expression cautious. She was small, precise in all her movements, with short dark hair and ink-stained fingers from her habit of writing notes by hand. She was the only person on the ship who had ever made voluntary contact with Zithri culture. She had spent 2 years on a neutral space station studying their language, their history, their biology, and she was still the only human alive who could speak their language without a translator implant. "Captain, we're picking up something," she said. "It's not a weapon test. It's a distress signal." The observation deck went quiet. "Zithri?" Lyra asked. "Yes, and it's coming from inside Zithri space, not from the border. Deep inside. Almost from the direction of their home world, Ethos Prime." Marin hesitated. "Captain, this signal is in the royal frequency. It's not a soldier's call. It's not a general's call. This signal uses the encryption code that only the royal family is authorized to broadcast." Dren turned to Lyra. "We turn around. Right now. We go back and report this to the Council. And while we turn around," Lyra said quietly, "whatever is in distress dies. It could be a trap. Everything could be a trap. That's never been a good enough reason to do nothing." She walked to the center of the deck, where the holographic display table cast blue light up across her face. "Marin, can you decode the signal?" "Already am." Marin's fingers moved quickly. "It's fragmented. Whoever sent this was badly injured or under heavy interference. She paused. "I'm getting a name. Calith." Nobody on the ship except Marin knew what that name meant. She looked up slowly. "That's the princess," she said. "The queen's daughter." "Captain, if the Zithri princess is broadcasting a distress signal from inside her own empire's space, then something has gone very wrong inside the empire," Lyra finished. She was silent for 3 seconds. Everyone on the deck held their breath. "We go in," she said. Dren closed his eyes briefly. "I'm going to write in my log that I advised against this. You always do, and I'm always grateful you never try to stop me." She turned to the helm. "Ensign, take us in. Minimal engine output, stealth protocols fully active, and someone wake up the medical team. Whoever we find at those coordinates, they might need it." The signal led them to the wreckage of a Zithri scout vessel, drifting through a dense field of crystallized dark matter that made navigation nearly impossible. The ISS Omen moved through it slowly, its deflector arrays working constantly to push the crystals aside. Zithari ships were always beautiful in a way that made human engineers deeply uncomfortable, organic in shape, as though grown rather than built, with sweeping curves and a surface that seemed to breathe with faint bioluminescent pulses. This one was broken in two. Its glow had almost entirely faded. One end burned with a slow, cold fire that had almost nothing left to consume. "Life signs?" Lyra asked. "One," said the sensors officer. "Very faint. Interior section of the forward hull. I'm taking a team in." Dren stepped forward. "Lyra." "Dren." She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression stopped his objection before it could form. "I'm taking a team in. You have the bridge." She went in with Marin and 4 security officers, all wearing full environmental suits. The breach they cut through the Zithari hull opened into a corridor that smelled of ozone and something sweeter that Marin identified as Zithari blood. A deep amber color that dried almost immediately on contact with oxygen, crystallizing into small, jewel-like formations. There was a trail of it. They followed it deeper into the ship, through compartments of extraordinary engineering and half-melted beauty, until they reached a sealed door at the back of the forward section. The door was marked with Zithari symbols. "What does it say?" Lyra asked Marin. Marin studied it for a moment. "It says, 'Do not enter.' And below that," she paused, "please." Lyra reached out and touched the door panel. It resisted, then reluctantly slid open. Inside, they found her. Caliph Alir was sitting on the floor against the far wall, her long legs pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was approximately humanoid in shape. The Zithari were bipedal, roughly human-proportioned, but the resemblance ended there. Her skin was a deep, iridescent blue-black, shifting color slightly as the light caught it, like oil on water. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a mass of thin, flexible filaments that moved slowly on their own, coiling and uncoiling with her breathing. Her eyes were enormous, occupying far more of her face than human eyes did, and their color was a deep amber with no visible pupils, though she was clearly looking directly at Lyra. She was young. Even across species, even without being able to read Zithari faces well, Marin could tell that. There was something unfinished about her, something that hadn't yet settled into certainty. She reminded Marin of students she had known, brilliant, restless, not yet sure what to do with their brilliance. She also had 3 wounds in her side that had almost killed her. When she saw the humans, she moved, fast, despite her injuries, scrambling to put the wall at her back, her filament hair rising outward in threat display. A weapon she had been holding clattered to the floor. She made a sound that wasn't language or wasn't yet language, somewhere between a growl and a chord played on an instrument that didn't exist. Lyra held up both hands, palms out. Universal gesture, she hoped. Empty hands. No threat. Marin stepped forward and spoke in Zithari. The princess froze. It wasn't the language that stopped her. It was the quality of it. Marin spoke Zithari the way a native would, with the correct harmonics and the subtle layering of tone that most translation implants completely missed. For a moment, Calitha's enormous amber eyes showed something that might have been shock, or might have been desperate, dangerous hope. "What did you say to her?" Lyra asked quietly. "I said, we found your signal. We're not here to harm you." I said. Marin hesitated. "I said you're safe. Is that a promise we can keep?" Marin looked at Lyra steadily. "I told her we'd try." Caliph looked at the 2 human women for a long moment. Then, slowly, she lowered herself back to the floor. Her filament hair dropped from its threat display into something closer to exhaustion. She spoke, a single sentence soft and complex as music. Marin went very still. "What?" Lyra said. "She says," Marin answered carefully, "that her mother tried to kill her." They brought Caliph aboard the ISS Omen against the strong recommendation of 4 of Lyra's officers and the vocal objection of the ship's security chief, a woman named Petra who had lost her brother at Kefren Station and had strong feelings about Zithari in general. Marin worked on Calitha's wounds in the medical bay while Lyra stood outside the transparent wall and watched. The princess was conscious throughout, watching everything with those wide amber eyes, flinching at nothing. She asked Marin questions constantly, quiet, rapid questions that Marin answered as best she could. After 2 hours, Marin came out. "She's stable," she said. "The wounds were made by Zithari weapons. Her own people did this to her." "Why?" Marin was quiet for a moment. "She told me some of it. Not all. She said there was a vote in the Imperial Council 3 days ago. Queen Seraphine passed a decree, the final expansion decree. It calls for the systematic destruction of all non-Zithari civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. All of them, permanently. Lyra felt the words land in her chest like stones dropped into deep water. All of them, she said. That includes Earth, the Renari systems, the Kashan Collective, every inhabited world in this sector. Approximately 40 billion lives. Marin's voice was steady, but her hands were not. Caliph voted against the decree. She was the only member of the royal family to do so. She argued that coexistence was possible, had been possible for 11 years, and that the decree was a declaration of genocide, not war. Queen Seraphine didn't imprison her. She ordered her execution, but someone helped her escape, her personal guard, a soldier named Soren. He got her to a scout ship before the execution order could be carried out. He stayed behind. Marin paused. She doesn't know if he's alive. Lyra turned back to look through the transparent wall at the Zithari princess sitting in the medical bay. Caliph met her gaze without looking away. She came toward human space on purpose, Lyra said slowly. She was broadcasting on the royal frequency on purpose. She wanted to be found. She wanted to warn someone, Marin said. She had no other options left. How long before the final expansion begins? She thinks 7 days. It takes time to mobilize a full Imperial fleet. 7 days. Lyra did the mathematics of 7 days against the distance to Earth, against the time it would take to get a message to the Council, against the time it would take for the Council to believe a report this extreme and then decide to act on it. The mathematics were not good. We can't do this alone, Dren said. He had been listening from the corridor. He stepped forward, not apologetic for eavesdropping, never apologetic for practicality. Lyra, even if everything the princess says is true, we can't stop an Imperial fleet. We're one ship. I know. Then what are you planning? Lyra looked at him, then at Marin, then at the princess through the wall. I'm planning to do what the Council would never authorize, she said, which is talk to the Queen. Marin spent the next 6 hours in the medical bay with Caliph, not just treating her wounds but talking. It started as a medical necessity. Marin needed to understand Zithari physiology well enough to complete the treatment, but it became something else. Caliph asked questions with an appetite that reminded Marin of herself as a student. She asked about human medicine, human governance, human art. She asked why human ships were made of metal instead of grown from biocomposite resin. She asked what music sounded like to humans, and when Marin played her 3 different songs through a small speaker, the princess listened with her filament hair perfectly still and her amber eyes wide. A Zithari expression, Marin had read, of deep attention. She's never been aboard a human ship, Marin told Lyra afterward. She's read about humans, studied us, actually. She has had access to everything the Zithari intelligence networks have gathered about human civilization for the past 11 years. She knows our history better than some of our own people, but she's never met a human before. And the Queen, Seraphine? Caliph says her mother was not always like this. She says the Queen ruled the Empire for nearly 300 years, and for most of that time she was a powerful but rational leader. Something changed. About 20 years ago, Seraphine began to withdraw, spent less time with the Council, spent more time consulting something she called the Deep Memory, which Caliph doesn't fully understand but believes is some kind of ancient Zithari record, a historical archive of the Empire's origins. She came out of that withdrawal with the final expansion decree fully formed, as though she had simply decided. Lyra filed all of this carefully. Does Caliph know where the Imperial fleet is being assembled? She does, and she told me willingly. She's not playing games, Captain. She came to us because she wants to stop this. She knows what it means for her. She's already been declared a traitor. If the Empire survives and she's captured, she dies. She has everything to lose, and she still came. Lyra nodded slowly. I need to ask her something directly. Can you translate? They went into the medical bay together. Caliph was sitting up on the treatment platform, her wounds bound in the human medical wrap that had replaced her own emergency bandages. She watched Lyra approach with those unblinking amber eyes. Lyra spoke plainly and let Marin translate. I'm going to try to open a direct communication channel with your mother. I want to propose a ceasefire and a negotiation. I know it's probably going to fail. I need to know, is there anything about your mother, any argument, any pressure point that has a chance of reaching her. Marin translated. Caliph listened. Then she was silent for a long moment. When she answered, her voice was lower than usual. Marin translated carefully. She says, her mother is afraid. Not of humans. She doesn't believe Seraphine fears any specific enemy. She is afraid of time. The Zithari live very long lives, but they are not immortal, and Seraphine is old, even by Zithari standards. Caliph believes her mother has become obsessed with leaving a legacy, with ensuring that the Zithari Empire will survive and dominate long after Seraphine herself is gone. The final expansion is not about hatred. It is about permanence. She wants to make the Zithari invulnerable forever. Then she's not a monster, Lyra said quietly. She says, her mother is the most dangerous kind of ruler. One who is doing what she believes is genuinely right. Lyra absorbed this. Then she said, through Marin, one more question. Does she know about a place called the Oracle? Caliph went very still. Her filament hair rose slowly, not in threat display, in something else, surprise maybe, or recognition. She spoke a single word. She says yes, Marin translated. And she says, how do you know about the Oracle? The Oracle was not a myth, though most humans believed it was. The records were there, scattered through ancient Zithari texts, through the navigation logs of 3 deep space probes that had been launched in the 22nd century and never returned, through a single fragmented transmission received by a radio telescope in Chile in 2209 that no one had ever fully decoded. Lyra knew about the Oracle because her grandmother had been one of the scientists on the Chile project. She had grown up with stories. She had always believed they were real. The Oracle, in the oldest Zithari records, was described as a consciousness that had existed since before most living civilizations had achieved spaceflight. It had no physical body of its own. Its mind existed inside the electromagnetic activity of a slowly dying star at the edge of the galaxy, a star that had been burning out for millions of years and had perhaps a few million more to go. It had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. It had spoken, in recorded history, exactly 9 times. Each time, it spoke because a civilization had reached a decision point that would determine not just its own future but the future of everything around it. The Zithari know the Oracle? Lyra asked. They revere it, Marin said. It's in their religion, their history. The Oracle spoke to the very first Zithari Empress, 4,000 years ago, and told her that the Empire would one day face a choice, expand through destruction or survive through connection. The Empress chose connection. It's why the Zithari built relationships with other civilizations for 3 millennia before this decade. And Seraphine is choosing destruction. Caliph thinks the Oracle will speak again. She thinks it may already be trying to. She says the quantum breach we detected, the one we were originally sent to investigate, came from the direction of the Oracle star. Everything clicked together in Lyra's mind, fast and clean, the way good plans always did. The Oracle sent a signal, she said. Not a distress signal, a summons. Marin looked at her carefully. You want to go to it. It's been there for millions of years. The seen civilizations make this choice before. If there's anything in this universe that might be able to reach Seraphine, Captain, this is not a plan. This is barely an idea. Most of the best things I've done started as barely an idea. Lyra turned to the door. Tell the princess. Tell her everything. And then ask her if she'll come with us. Marin translated. Caliph listened. Then, without waiting for the translation of her answer, she stood up from the treatment platform, wincing from her wounds but standing fully upright, and walked to stand beside Lyra. Marin smiled despite herself. I don't think she needs to say anything. They found the Imperial fleet 4 hours later. They hadn't been looking for it. They had been navigating around the edge of the Viridian Nebula toward the Oracle star, moving in stealth, when the sensors lit up like every alarm in the ship had triggered simultaneously. 312 warships. Zithari warships were not like human warships. They were immense. The smallest was twice the size of the ISS Omen. They were black and they pulsed with that deep bioluminescent light, and they moved in formation the way a murmuration of birds moves, constantly shifting, flowing, perfectly coordinated. It was beautiful in the way that an avalanche is beautiful. You could only appreciate it fully if it was not aimed at you. It was aimed at them. They've seen us, said Petra from the security station, her voice tight. Our stealth is useless at this range. A communication channel opened. Lyra didn't have a choice about whether to answer. The face that appeared on the screen was not what she expected. She had braced for Seraphine. She had a dozen things she wanted to say, a dozen ways she was prepared to begin. Instead, she faced General Torek. He was enormous even by Zithari standards, his blue-black skin mottled with the silver patterns that Marin had told her indicated advanced age and high military rank. His filament hair was bound back in the style that meant war footing. He looked at Lyra with the specific expression of someone who does not consider what they are looking at to be a meaningful obstacle. He spoke. Marin translated from the other side of the bridge. He says, "You are carrying something that belongs to the Empire. Hand it over and we let your ship leave Zithari space intact." Lyra clasped her hands behind her back. "Tell him I don't know what he's referring to." Marin translated. Torek responded. "He says he is not interested in games. He has scanned the ship. He knows the princess is aboard. He is giving us one opportunity to surrender her." Lyra looked at the view screen. She looked at Torek's enormous, unimpressed face. Then she looked over her shoulder because she could feel that she was being watched and found Caliph standing at the back of the bridge. She had followed them up from the medical bay and nobody had noticed because they had been too busy being alarmed by 300 warships. Their eyes met. Lyra turned back to the screen. "Tell him," she said, "that I have a great deal of respect for military rank and tradition. Tell him that I understand he's following orders. And then tell him that I will destroy this ship before I hand over a refugee. So he needs to decide whether his orders are worth 300 warships and an interstellar incident." Marin translated carefully every word. Torek was quiet for a moment. His filament hair moved slightly, a micro-expression that Marin would later describe as contempt mixed with reluctant recalibration. He closed the channel. "He's not attacking," Petra said, watching the sensors. "But he's repositioning. He's going to follow us. Let him." Lyra moved to the helm. "Get us out of here. Best speed. Stealth is useless, so don't bother, just run. And someone figure out if 300 warships can follow us into the corona of a dying star." The answer, it turned out, was no. The star was called Varith Sol in Zithari, which meant roughly the last burning thought. It was ancient and cooling, its core reactions slowing over millions of years, its surface temperature lower than a young star by several thousand degrees. It had a strange beauty, deep red and amber, with veins of white where the remaining fusion reactions pulsed. It looked, Lyra thought, like a dying ember. They couldn't go near the surface. The radiation alone would have killed them. But they didn't need to. The signal they were following led them to a stable point in the star's upper magnetosphere, a zone where the electromagnetic fields formed a kind of natural shelter. Their instruments went strange there. The star's field interfered with everything electronic, muted and rerouted and rewrote signals in ways that shouldn't have been physically possible. Behind them, 200 kilometers back, Torek's fleet had stopped. Their ships were not equipped to handle the magnetospheric interference, Marin explained. They couldn't enter this zone. They were alone. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The crew sat at their stations in a silence that was not quite quiet. The star made sound, or rather the ship's instruments converted its electromagnetic activity into sound, and it was like nothing any of them had ever heard. Not music exactly, but not noise either. Pattern within pattern within pattern. Then the channel opened. No one pressed anything. No one sent a signal. The channel simply opened, as though someone, something, had been waiting for them to arrive and had chosen this moment. The voice that came through was not a voice. It was the star's own frequencies, modulated, shaped, given just enough structure to carry meaning. It spoke in every language simultaneously. Lyra heard it in English, and she would later learn that Marin heard it in Zithari, and that somehow the meaning was not just translated but carried fully, with all its depth, into each listener's own understanding. It said, "The choice has come again. It has come 900 times in the history of this galaxy. Fear dressed as certainty, reaching for permanent safety through the permanent silencing of others. It never works. It has never worked. And yet each time, the civilization facing this choice believes itself to be the first, the only, the exception. The Queen believes this. She is not an exception. She is a repetition. You have brought us what we needed. Not a weapon. Not an army. A bridge. The bridge does not know it is a bridge yet." Lyra looked at Caliph. Calith's amber eyes were wide and her filament hair had gone completely still, not in threat display or exhaustion but in a reverence that looked, across all their differences, completely familiar. "She can hear it too," Marin said softly. The oracle spoke again. There is one path that does not end in the destruction of either civilization. It requires one person to go back. Nobody moved. The princess knows what she must do. She has known since before she sent the distress signal. She was afraid. Fear is not a failure. It is information. She is ready now. Caliph spoke quietly in Zithari, not to anyone in particular. Marin listened. She says, I have to go back to my mother, not as a traitor, as a daughter. She says, Marin's voice caught slightly. She says she is the only person alive who Queen Seraphine ever truly loved, and she has spent her whole life either using that or running from it. She says it's time to use it. Use it for what? Lyra asked. Marin listened. To make her mother see what she is becoming. A mother can sometimes hear things from her child that she cannot hear from anyone else. Not always, but sometimes, and sometimes is all they have. Lyra looked at Caliph for a long moment. She'll be killed. Marin translated. Caliph answered. She says maybe. She says probably not. She says her mother has tried to kill her once and failed, and that she hopes the failure was not an accident. She says she thinks her mother gave Soren the chance to save her because some part of Seraphine wanted her saved. A pause. She says she has to find out. Lyra turned away from them both. She stood at the front of the observation deck and looked at the dying star, that ancient, slowly fading light that had been watching civilizations make their choices since before human beings had come down from their trees. She thought about Kefren Station, about the order she had given, about the choice she had made in 16 hours that had cracked a planet. She had believed she had no other option. She had spent 3 years trying to decide if she had been right. She thought about what the oracle had said. Each time, the civilization facing this choice believes itself to be the first, the only, the exception. She turned back. We'll take her back to Zithari space, she said. To the border of the fleet. Close enough that she can signal them. We'll make sure they see she's coming willingly. She looked at Caliph. And I'm coming with her. Marin stared. Captain, she shouldn't walk into that alone. And if the Queen sees that a human came with her willingly, that might matter. It might say something about what's still possible. She almost smiled. Tell her. Marin translated. Caliph listened. Then she did something that none of them had seen her do before. She laughed. Not loudly, not for long, but genuinely. A sound like bells struck once. She says, Marin reported, still surprised, that you are exactly as strange and reckless as the intelligence files said you were. Accurate, Lyra said. Let's go. They prepared for 4 hours. Lyra recorded a full report and transmitted it toward Earth on the strongest signal the Omen could produce. It would take days to arrive, but it would arrive. She gave Dren his orders. If she and Caliph were not back in 72 hours, take the ship and the report back to the Council, and push as hard as possible for a diplomatic response rather than a military one. Dren agreed to the orders. He did not agree with them. He said so clearly because honesty was how he showed care. Lyra thanked him for it. Marin volunteered to come with them. Lyra told her no. Marin argued. Lyra overruled her and then, before the argument could continue, quietly told her that the Omen would need its xenobiologist more than the mission would need a translator, because there was a chance this mission ended with an Imperial fleet that needed to be talked down, and doing that without Marin's voice was impossible. Marin went silent. Then she helped prepare the shuttle. They left in a small craft, Lyra, Caliph, and Soren. Soren had appeared that morning. He had escaped from Zithari space in a single pilot vessel that he had hidden in the wreckage field near the princess's ship, and had tracked the Omen by its residual ion trail. He was large, scarred, almost completely silent, and he had clearly been Caliph's personal guard since she was very young, judging by the way they didn't need to speak to understand each other. He acknowledged Lyra with a single nod. She nodded back. Professional understanding. The shuttle moved toward the fleet. Torek's ships did not fire. Caliph had broadcast ahead of them on the royal frequency, openly, unencrypted, stating that she was returning willingly to face judgment, and that the human captain was accompanying her as a formal witness. The word she used, Marin had explained before they left, was the Zithari diplomatic term for a neutral observer at a negotiation. It was old protocol, ancient even, but it was protocol the Empire recognized, and it meant that the captain could not, under Imperial law, be harmed without the Empire formally breaking its own rules. How sturdy is that protection, really? Lyra had asked. Sturdy enough that they'll think twice. Marin had said. That might be all you need. They were escorted to the fleet's command vessel, the largest of all the Zithri warships, 3 times the size of the ISS Omen, its hull burning with deep blue-green light as though the entire structure were alive and breathing. Lyra had seen photographs of Zithri ships. Being inside one was entirely different. The corridors were not corridors so much as passageways through something organic, the walls smooth and slightly warm, the air smelling of minerals and something sweet. The lighting came from the walls themselves. They were brought to a great chamber at the heart of the ship. And there, for the first time, Lyra saw Queen Seraphine. She was not what Lyra had imagined. Lyra had imagined something terrifying in a loud way, a military figure, angular, draped in power, filling the room with presence the way conquerors do. What she found instead was a woman who sat very still in a seat that was not quite a throne but occupied the space of one. She was small compared to many of the Zithri Lyra had now encountered, and her blue-black skin had taken on a quality that Marin, on seeing the transmission later, would describe as silver veining, the most extreme marking of age the Zithri showed. She was ancient. Even not knowing the species, Lyra could feel it, the quality of stillness that came from having been alive for so long that stillness had become a physical trait. Her filament hair was white. Lyra hadn't known it could be white. Her eyes were the same deep amber as Kalitha's but older, layered, opaque in a way that the princess's were not, as though centuries of thought had settled in them like sediment. She looked at her daughter. She did not look at Lyra at all, not at first. Kalith walked forward alone, without Sorin, without hesitation. She stopped at what Lyra guessed was a respectful distance and spoke in Zithri, not the quick, questioning speech she had used with Marin, but something slower and more formal. Torek stood to one side, his enormous frame rigid with something between military precision and the specific discomfort of witnessing a private thing. Seraphine answered her daughter. They spoke for a long time. Lyra understood none of it and did not move and did not look away, because she believed, and she was right, that how she stood in this moment mattered, that stillness and open hands and steady eyes were their own form of language. Then Seraphine looked at Lyra. Her amber eyes moved across the human woman with an expressionless thoroughness, taking in everything. Then she spoke in Zithri, a short sentence directed at Lyra. Lyra waited. Kalith turned to her and said, in accented but clear English, the first English Lyra had heard her speak. She asks, "Why did you come?" Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell her, because your daughter asked, and because I'm tired of the alternative." Kalith translated. Seraphine looked at her for another long moment. Then she spoke again. Kalith translated again. She says, "The alternative has kept my people safe for 3 centuries. What makes you believe connection is stronger than removal of the threat?" Lyra took a breath. "Tell her, I cracked a planet once. I believed I had to. I'm not sure I was wrong, but I know that every decision I've made since has been shaped by that crack, and some of those decisions were worse, not better. Certainty is expensive. You pay for it in everything that comes after. Tell her I've been paying for 3 years, and I think she has been paying for longer than that." Kalith translated. Seraphine went very still. Then, and it was the most unexpected thing Lyra had seen in 2 days of extraordinary events, the Queen closed her eyes. Not in dismissal, in something that looked, across every alien difference, very much like recognition. The conversation that followed lasted 8 hours. Lyra didn't speak for most of it. This was Kalitha's negotiation, not hers. The Oracle had been right about that. She was a witness. She stood and sat and stood again and accepted the small cup of something warm and mineral-tasting that a Zithri attendant brought her without being asked, and she watched the Queen and the Princess talk. Torek left after the first 2 hours. Whatever he saw happening in that room was outside his ability to intervene in, and he was too good a soldier to create a scene he wasn't ordered to create. What Kalith told her mother, in pieces over those hours, Lyra would learn afterward from Marin's translation of the recording. She told her about the Oracle. She told Seraphine that she had heard it speak, that it had named what the Empire was doing as a repetition of a choice that had never led to permanence, only to the destruction of the civilization that made it. She told her that the Oracle had seen this 900 times and that no exceptions existed. She told her mother about Marin, about a human woman who had spent 2 years learning a language not her own, not for intelligence gathering, not for advantage, but because she found the Zithri beautiful and wanted to understand them. She told her that humans were afraid of the Zithri Empire, but that the fear was not the same as hostility, that humans were afraid of many things they didn't try to destroy. She told her mother that she was afraid of time, that she understood it, that she had watched Seraphine change over 20 years and had known what was driving it and had not known how to speak to it. She said she was sorry for not trying sooner. And Seraphine, ancient and silver-veined and still, listened. She did not speak much in those 8 hours. When she spoke it was in short, quiet statements that Lyra couldn't understand but could feel. Each one weighted, measured, honest. She was not performing deliberation. She was actually deliberating. At the end of 8 hours, Seraphine looked at Lyra again. She spoke to her daughter. Kalitha's voice, when she translated, was careful and a little rough. She says, "I will not issue the order. Not today." And she says, "Today may become tomorrow, and tomorrow may become a week, and if in that week she is not given reason to reconsider, she will put the decree to a new vote of the full council." A pause. She says she does not promise that the vote will go differently, but she will give it time. She will give it. Kalitha's voice caught slightly. She will give her daughter time. Lyra unclenched a fist she hadn't been aware of making. "Tell her," she said quietly, "that a week is enough. Tell her that humans work quickly when we have to." Part 11. Aftermath. The shuttle ride back to the Omen was quiet. Soren flew. Kalith sat beside Lyra in the co-pilot section, looking out at the fleet, 300 warships that were still there, still armed, still immense, but holding. "She might change her mind," Kalith said. Her English was hesitant but real. "My mother. She might, in a day or 2 days, decide that she made an error. That she was," she searched for the word, "manipulated by sentiment." "She might," Lyra said. "You don't seem worried." "I'm very worried. I'm just also aware that worrying about it doesn't help." Lyra looked at her. "You did something remarkable back there. You had every reason to never go near her again." Kalith looked at her hands, long, blue-black fingers with delicate silver nail formations. "She is my mother." Remarkable seems like too large a word for what a daughter does. "Not from where I was standing." Kalith was quiet for a moment. Then, "What happens now?" "Now I transmit everything back to Earth and strongly recommend that the Council send a diplomatic team faster than they have ever sent anything. I tell them 7 days even though we got a week because I don't trust margins. I ask them to give your mother something to work with, some evidence that connection is possible." She paused. "And you?" "I don't know. I can't go back to the Empire while the decree is still pending. I am still technically a traitor." She said the word with a flat, dark humor. "And I cannot go forward with humans who don't know me." "You can stay on the Omen," Lyra said, "until things settle. Marin will be deeply happy about it. She has about 400 more questions." Kalitha's filament hair moved, that slight rising that Lyra had started to recognize, across these extraordinary days, as something like amusement. "400 at minimum," she said. Lyra almost laughed. The Omen came into view, small and dark and human-made, and entirely unimpressive against the scale of what surrounded it, and somehow still exactly where it was needed. Epilogue. What the Oracle knew. 3 weeks later, a formal diplomatic delegation from Earth met with representatives of the Zithari Imperial Council on a neutral station in the Viridian Nebula. The final expansion decree was suspended. Not cancelled, but suspended, pending negotiations that everyone involved understood would take years, possibly decades, possibly longer. The Zithari did not think in short time frames, and the Empire's fears were not small fears. They would not be resolved in a meeting or a year or a generation, but they would be addressed. They would be spoken. That was what the Oracle had said was needed, and Lyra, who had never been religious about anything in her life, found herself believing it. Queen Seraphine did not attend the meeting. She sent Kalith. It was the first time a Zithari princess had formally represented the Empire in an external diplomatic function. The Council had required 3 full sessions to agree to it. Seraphine had insisted. Nobody in the Empire's 1,000-year history could say precisely what it meant. That was perhaps the point. General Torek retired from active command 6 months later. He gave no public reason. Those who knew him said he had been unsettled by the events in the Viridian Nebula, not by the outcome, but by the efficiency of it. He was a soldier. The most efficient solution had not been a military one, and he was old enough to find that genuinely disturbing. Soren, who had survived after all, his imprisonment had been a political gesture, Seraphine had quietly ensured his release within days of Calitha's return, continued as the princess's guard. He was present at every diplomatic session, standing behind Calith, perfectly still, perfectly watchful, occasionally exchanging what appeared to be extremely brief and meaningful glances with Marin Cole across the conference table. Dr. Marin Cole became Earth's first official Zithari linguistic and cultural liaison. She published 3 monographs, gave dozens of interviews, and continued to write her notes by hand. She described the Zithari, in her first paper, as the most alien civilization humans have yet encountered, and the one in which, if you look carefully enough, you can most clearly see yourself. Captain Lyra Voss received a formal commendation from the Council and a quiet, official reprimand for violating her mission orders. The commendation and the reprimand were filed in the same folder. Dren Vale told her this was possibly the most accurate administrative summary of her career that could be imagined. She didn't disagree. She returned to the Viridian Nebula once, alone in a small single-person craft. She went back to the zone in the dying star's magnetosphere where the Oracle had spoken. She stayed for an hour, listening to the electromagnetic sound pattern within pattern within pattern. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. She went back to work. The Oracle burned on, slow and amber and ancient, watching the galaxy make its choices, as it always had, as it always would, outlasting empires and fears and certainty alike, until at last, in its own vast time, it went gently out.